I'm Coach Dave. Welcome back to Coach's Corner.
Come on.
In the heart of Brooklyn, where the legends of boxing were made, one woman stands out. Not just for her skill in the ring, but for her unyielding spirit. Former heavyweight champion and now New York school teacher, Sonya Lamonakis, is widely recognized for her contributions to women's boxing. Known for her power and determination, Lamonakis made her mark in a sport historically dominated by men, carving out a space for herself as a competitive and respected athlete. Her story is one of breaking barriers, defying expectations, and leaving a lasting impact on the sport of boxing.
Welcome back to Coach's Corner. Once again, we're still here at Gleason's gym in Brooklyn. We have a really special guest here. We have Sonya Lamonakis. She's the Vice President of USA Boxing Metropolitan in the New York area, former pro fighter, school teacher. Current school teacher. So, you know, again, we're happy to have you, Sonya.
Thank you.
I appreciate you making time for us down here.
Sure.
To be on Coach's Corner and, you know, to catch up with you. I talked to everybody kind of leading into this, and I know a little background. Why don't you tell everybody how boxing found you? I know you were an athlete in college, softball player, and which I didn't realize, you're originally from New England.
I'm a New England girl.
And
I'm a masshole.
You're a mess.
I'm a masshole.
You know, and all the grief that you give us over the years, you're from up there.
I'm from up there.
You're from up there. Now, you trained with the Whitleys.
Yes, that's where I started.
My guys, the other night, I saw them at the show, and I was like, I'm going to see Sonya, and they're like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
But what was it for you that boxing found you?
So, boxing found me in 2001. I was at a ATM late one night in Springfield, Mass, and I got jumped, and I got my throat cut. And I didn't know how to defend myself, and didn't have any kind of skills like that. Even though I was big, I was strong, but I didn't know. And you know, I went home and thought about it. The next day I went back to Gold's Gym, and I told my friend what happened. She said, you should start boxing. You should learn self-defense. So I packed up all my stuff, went to the South End Community Center with Victor James, who's in Connecticut.
Yeah, he's in Stanford now.
Yeah, he's in Stanford, and started boxing, and 3 months later I took my first fight with Devon Kennedy from Connecticut, who's the first woman to win a gold medal for the U.S. She had 24 fights, I had none. She kicked my ass from corner to corner to corner, but I never touched the canvas. And then a year later I came back and beat her. And then started my journey boxing. So
coming out of Mass, how did you end up migrating into New York?
So I came to New York for the Golden Gloves. You know, in 2006, I moved out here. I got a teaching job in the Bronx, in the South Bronx on Kelly Street, and I wanted to fight in the Golden Gloves, and that was my goal. I came out here, I won the Golden Gloves 4 times, and then I got to turn pro with Lou DiBella. Yeah, so you were a 4-time champ in
Correct.
The
The Golden Gloves. So preparing for that first fight, and yeah, again, we'll get to Lou in a couple of minutes, because there wasn't a lot of women fighters prevalent in those days. Right. Now the women's sport of boxing is really taking off, and there's a lot of great women fighters out there right now. How was it for you? And, you know, getting work to get ready for fights is hard enough as it is, and now you're a woman getting ready in the heavyweight division. How was it for you to prepare in those days? I was sparring men at Gleason's. Yeah. I mean, I didn't have any heavyweight women. There's no, you know, the women in New York were my competition because we're so small of a unit, so my sparring was here at Gleason's with heavyweight men and big guys, and I had a guy from the Turkish Olympic team, Big George we used to call him. You know, he was like 6'3", and he was my sparring partner for years. Yeah. And that's how I got myself in shape. At that time, who were you training with when you came into Gleason's? When I first came into Gleason's, I was training with Leisha Baca with Team Freeform with a bunch of the girls, and then I ended up with Lennox Blackmore and stayed with the Guyanese for many years, Dylan Carew, Leon Moore, all those guys. Right. So, you know, you had a big background as an athlete, you know, coming out, played softball, transitioned. Field hockey. Yeah. Transitioned into boxing. Now, when you were in college at Springfield, were you playing sports there at that time? I played softball at Springfield, yes. Played softball at Springfield. So when you came into boxing, what was the change for you as an athlete?
Well, I mean, it was a drastic change. I was older. I was still in the gym. I was working out, so I was in shape. I mean, it wasn't really much of a change being an athlete. It's just a different sport, you know, and it just taught me a lot about myself. It helped me with my discipline. It helped me with my anger and helped me to be a better person. And I fell in love with the sport and continued on my journey.
You know, as an athlete, and you've been in boxing now, you're, you know, not only as a fighter, but now around the sport as a trainer, involved heavily. When you first came into the sport, like many athletes who are successful in other sports, did you find it, and you had great success right away, did you find it difficult to adjust and on your own self to see results? Because you were successful before as an athlete.
Well, I was before as an athlete, but my first 3 fights as an amateur I lost. And I actually think that helped me a lot because I was able to, you know, build on from that and realize what I had to do, and I learned how to make adjustments, and I feel like I learned from my losses better than I would have learned from my wins if I won in the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, and it was difficult being a woman in a sport that was dominated by men. You know, when I was going to the nationals in 2001, 2002, we had our own separate nationals. You know, it wasn't until 2009 when I went to the nationals in Colorado where we were actually allowed to stay at the Olympic Center. You know, I roomed with Christina Cruz, and that was like the first year they allowed the women to stay at the Olympic Center, where they would give us what they gave the guys. They would, you know, give us uniforms, give us shorts, give us sneakers. You know, it was never that way, but for that last 9 years, we really advocated for the women to be treated equally, because it's, you know, I see myself as a pioneer in amateur boxing for women, because at that time it wasn't like that in the beginning, you know. So it was a massive journey that I undertook, and I'm glad to be part of it, because now look where they're at.
Yeah, I mean, look, as a pioneer in the early days, and I've been around New York and have seen a lot of the women up and come through the area, and some of the trouble of the journey for it to be accepted, not only outside of the sport, but in the sport, and you being a pioneer. What do you see now? Because you were there in the preliminary days. Now in the women's sport, there's a big boom. You know, we're going to see Katie Taylor fight Serrano again. Great fight. I mean, you're talking, they're selling out arenas, whereas years ago, you couldn't even get people to really understand women's boxing. Where do you see it now, as opposed to where you were, and where do you think it's going?
Well, I mean, it's been a big change. It's done a big circle. I mean, now it's highlighting on major cards, their main events, you know, their pay-per-view events. I mean, I was fortunate to fight on the Andre Berto Victor Ortiz undercard at Foxwoods, and for me, I was on HBO. That was a great experience, and that was a long time ago. That was like 2008. You know, so back then, even being able to do that, from now to where we're at, it's still changed a lot. I mean, these girls are headlining cards, their main events, they're making big money, you know, $1 million purses.
Do you feel, now look, you had a great amateur career, went out with the Olympic team. You were the first woman signed by Lou DiBella. Do you feel now, maybe at that time you missed your calling as far as where women are today? And how do you think, if it was fast forward today with you as a pro, where do you see yourself?
No, I don't really think I missed my calling. I think I was in the right place at the right time, and you know, I had a big fan base. I was fighting out of Gleason's when I won my last Golden Gloves, and I remember, I think that year, Bruce, I think I got 90 tickets from Bruce that year, and I just was able to create a big fan base, and that's really what boxing is. It's the business of boxing. If you can sell tickets, any promoter will put you on. So for me, it was a little bit different. You know, I had a big Greek fan base that would come with their little Greek flags, and it was easy for me to convince promoters to let me go on because I always sold tickets. So I had a little bit of a different, you know, journey than everybody else did. But they're making their way through winning the nationals, getting signed with top promoters. You know, I mean, everybody's in the business. Top Rank is doing it. You know, Golden Boy's doing it. Lou DiBella's still doing it. You know, so it's still happening. It's just happening at a bigger pace now.
Yeah. Now, your transition from amateur, were you thinking of going pro? When did it hit you at that point to say, look, I can go to the next level here? And, you know, at that time, you had to kind of pave the way. You had to, not only you could sell tickets, you could fight. So if anybody who's seen you fight and knows, you know, was in New York when you were fighting, you can fight. You're not a fluke. You know the game. You know your way around the ring. But you had to pave your way. How did becoming a pro happen, and how did you end up with Lou?
I had a friend working for Lou DiBella, and she said, "You want to turn pro? I'm working for Lou. I can get you on. He's got a show in Worcester, Massachusetts." And I was like, "Sure, let's do it." So I had my debut at Mechanics Hall in Worcester, Mass, and knocked her out. I was my knockout in the first round, and that was it. He said, "Can you sell ticket to New York?" And I said, "Sure," and that was it. And that's how I started my journey.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, your pro career, 15 fights?
15 fights.
10-2, 3 draws?
Correct.
Correct? What was the point that you said, okay?
Once I won my world title, I won the New York State title, I won my world title, I was like, not really sure where else I want to go with this. You know, I felt like that's what I wanted to accomplish. Once I hit it and I got my world title, I beat a world champion to become a world champion. I didn't pick and choose an opponent who I knew I was going to beat. You know, I boxed somebody with a bigger record than me. There was the champion there, and I beat her and took her belt. So to me, what else can I want from that? You know, that's it.
You went out on your shield top right there and everything. But you know, after boxing, where you are now, let's talk about, you're done with the sport. Now you've been in the gym for many years, living it, eating it. You know, not only you have your career as a teacher, so we know you're wearing dual hats. You're not just a professional fighter. You're working and you're fighting and you're putting it together.
The entire time.
The entire time, which is tough, right? We know that. You see it, right? But when you decided it was over for you as the competing aspect, what were your thoughts? And let's lead us how you, I know you're heavy in the metros, but how did you come back into the fold here?
So I really never left. I mean, I started doing USA Boxing Metro in 2012 as a registration chair, doing books for Bruce here at Gleason's, and by 2014 I was making a difference with the Metros and the amateurs, that they were like, come on board for the board of directors. I did, and then the next thing I knew, I was the vice president and the registration chair. So I really never left to be able to come back. I just stayed the old time. So once I came to Gleason's in 2005, I've been here ever since.
Yeah, but your role got bigger now.
Yeah,
right.
I wear a lot more hats.
You wear a lot more hats. Tell us about the Metros right now. We see a lot of great fighters coming out of the New York area. You know, and look, to me, boxing is the New York area. For people around the country, they don't realize what it takes to compete in the Metros, to compete in the Golden Gloves.
Right.
You know, they think, oh, you train a little bit, you fight. But, you know, to get to the finals or the semis of these tournaments, it takes a lot.
Right.
What are you seeing as the movement right now in the Metros, and what are you guys working on to keep the momentum of this sport going?
So USA Boxing Metro has 3 major tournaments throughout the year. We have the Ring Masters, which kind of has taken over the Golden Gloves. We have the New York Boxing Tournament, and we have the Metropolitan Championships. And we run a ranking system. So after the Metros, which is this month, we take the highest scoring boxer and we offer them a sponsored trip to the Nationals in December. So, you know, Metro is the #3 performing LBC in the country. We're 2 shows a weekend. You know, we're always busy. We have a ton of athletes that come out of New York. We have a huge membership, almost 4,000 between coaches, athletes, doctors, and officials. So we're really busy. We help a lot of kids, keep them off the streets with these tournaments, you know, because they're always in the gym. There's always a club show. There's always a premium you can fight on. There's always a belt show you can fight on. So we're really doing it for these kids and keeping them off the streets through boxing.
Yeah. Now, you said about, you know, sending kids to nationals and being the biggest, one of the biggest LBCs out there right now. How are you guys, besides the membership, how are you managing that and managing, you know, funding it, you know, organizational-wise and everything else? Because, you know, coming out of a little smaller area in Connecticut, there's a lot of challenges out there, and I'm sure you see the challenges yourself now magnified. What's the success formula that other people and other LBCs and other area can look at that you guys have put together?
So we have different level shows where you can have a club show, which is in a gym. you know, and there's a cap on ticket prices, and there's a cap on the number of bouts you can have. We also have premium events where they can do like MSG, the Barclays, concert halls where they can charge more for a ticket, and they can also fit more people in there. So we're charging them more money because they're making a lot more money. And USA Boxing Metro also does a lot of third-party sanctions. So we have the big charity events like Haymakers for Hope, Long Island Fight for Charity, the District Attorney's Office boxes the District Attorney's Office. So we do a lot of third parties in New York that helps us to make a lot of money.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, as far as, you know, doing all these shows and money being raised, you know, that's a full-time gig right there, to spread it out and to say who needs it and who. How do you guys determine that, and what is your process with all of that? Because
so for the elite, we use a ranking system, and we just go so it's fair and transparent to everybody. For the juniors and the younger kids, we do stipends. So if they have, we similar to USA Boxing, where if they have a 50-50 record, a 500 record, and they have a certain amount of fights, we can give them a stipend to go to the nationals. But you know, USA Boxing has changed a lot. When I was amateur, we used to travel up to the regionals in upstate New York to go qualify there to go to the nationals. Now, you just need to be an open class fighter. Yeah. And, you know, that's changed the dynamics of the LBCs. I mean, we're the grassroots. We're supposed to be doing these tournaments to decide who's going to be the best, and they took it away from us, and now they're just doing their own. So their tournaments have expanded greatly, and ours kind of became irrelevant. So our adjustment to that was creating a ranking system where we send the top athletes in our LBC that do the best in these 3 tournaments to the nationals, and that's kind of how we solved the problem.
Years ago it was Lake Placid. You had to go through Lake Placid to get out there.
Yeah.
Now, you know, not only doing this for the athletes, and which is great, you're, like you said, you're boots on the ground. And I know you, and I've seen you, and I know how you run. You know, you're by the book, you run a great show, you run a great organization, you're a great teacher out there. What are you guys doing in the Metros for training, for coaches, for judges, you know, to bring in not only the old-time boxing people, but there's new people coming in. Mm-hmm. And I know you're a teacher by trade, and look, if people go to shows, they know you're always talking. Right. You're always making sure the protocol and the process. What else are you guys doing outside of that to educate?
So as far as coaches, we have a lot of coach clinics. We do peak performance series where we bring in strength and conditioning coaches. We bring in health and nutrition coaches. We bring in, you know, Joe Higgins, who's a level 4 coach, to talk to our new coaches to teach them what you need for the corner, what you need to do in the corner, how to identify issues with your boxer, how to correct problems, how to properly score points, because people get confused with amateur boxing. They don't understand it's a scoring system. You know, you can win 1 round and win the fight, even though there's 3 rounds. And it depends on what your score is. So a lot of people don't understand that. It's a 10-9 must at least. Well, if it's a 10-6 round, but you lose the next 2, you could still win the fight. So to really teach these officials and teach these coaches how scoring really works makes a big difference for us. And we'd really try to educate.
Now, do you see the trend? You know, obviously you have more people to choose from being in the Metro. You know, you got 5 boroughs, Long Island, parts of Westchester coming in here. Are you seeing the trend of more people getting involved who are more at the novice end of this sport that need to be educated, or where do you see that trend going? So
I think with you know, social media, Jake Paul, celebrity boxing, all this stuff going on, which is great for the sport, it's attention for the sport. It's kind of brought a whole new league in of boxers that are actually not elite boxers. They're celebrity boxers. They're, you know, women that are wearing a little bit of clothes, and you know, people want to see that. It's entertainment, you know, different than it is as a sport of boxing. So, you know, there's been a little shift, but I mean, all eyes on boxing is a good thing. So I don't have a problem with all these other celebrity, you know, things going on, and you know, Jake Paul and all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, you know, I have my opinion on Jake Paul. I got to give it to him. The guy trains, no matter what. He has a lot of money, doesn't have to box. Right. He's not a street kid. He didn't grow up rough. He's in a position where, you know, what he's doing, I give him credit, because it's not easy, as you know, as a fighter. But, you know, with these influencers coming out there, and
you probably hear the stories more because you're all around. People want to box. They think it's easy. I want to box. I want to get involved in the sport. The education process of having the right people around. Tell me, like you said about the training and everything else, how do you maneuver through that when you're doing shows and you got to make some hard decisions there?
I mean, it's not really difficult for me. I really have an eye for it, and I speak the truth, and because at the end it's about the safety of the boxers. And if I'm worried about it, or if it's too much of a concern of mine, I'm not going to let it happen. You know, and unfortunately there's a lot of people that think they know boxing because they box as an amateur, and they actually don't. They don't know how to coach, they don't know how to teach, they don't even know how to teach the boxer how to throw a correct 1-2. So I mean, boxing can be full of a lot of fluff, unfortunately, you know, but I try to, you know, I don't interfere with coaches and what they do, but I do speak to athletes and let them know where they're at. I mean, these kids turn pro with no elite experience. He had 9 fights and he turns pro. I'm like, well, what are you doing? You never even boxed a 3-minute round. You know, well, I can sell tickets. Well, guess what? You're going to get to about 4-0 and fight somebody that's better than you, and your career's over. So it makes me a little sad to see these kids think they know the business and they really don't. So I really try to educate them on the boxing business. I've recently obtained my manager's license in New York, so I have a few fighters that I'm managing now that, you know, I'll create a path and journey for and go that route.
I mean, definitely your experience as a fighter and being involved in the sport. No aspiration to train, be more on the management end?
Well, I'm managing, but, you know, I work out when I have time, so I really don't have time to train people. But when people make a special request, I give them an hour or whatever. They come to Gleason's, I give them that session and get that 1 hour of training in.
I mean, I'll put you on the spot here, right? Top woman prospect comes in, wants you to train her. Are you trading your hat in?
I'm going to actually, I got Nikki Pita, who's the #1 boxer coming out of Greece. She's actually going to be coming here in October, and she's going to be staying in Harlem. So she's going to come to Gleason's on Wednesday so I can do a session with her.
Yeah. So that, yeah, I mean, you know, coming out of your country, being, you feel that's, I mean, right now, with boxing out there, training, what would you say? And I'm sure you got your speech of what you tell people when they come in and they want to train. What would be your advice? Is like, look, you want to box as an amateur. Everybody has an aspiration of being pro. Well, we know that's not even feasible.
I don't even really go that route. My direct thing to them is that you need to have a backup plan. You know, boxing is really a hobby unless you start very young and you're getting signed by a big promoter. Otherwise, have a backup plan. You don't want to go to college, be an electrician, go to a vocational school. You know, get some sort of training where you can get into a union, be a mason, be a carpenter. You know, New York has a ton of unions. You know, get stability, and then you want to box, then you can box. You know, but just throwing it all into boxing, I mean, it's a poor man's sport. You know, this is how people make it out of the ghetto, but not everybody can make it out because there's too many now that are boxing and they don't. They become an opponent and then they end up sipping out of a straw in 10 years.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand the back-end business of boxing. A lot of fighters out there chasing the same nickel. Right. If you're not an elite 1%er that a top promotional company or an Olympic aspiring athlete, it's going to be a hard road if you got to work because, you know, if you were 20-0 as a Major League Baseball pitcher, they're going to open a checkbook for you.
Right.
You know fighters yourself who are 20, 15-0, 10, they're not making a living. They're not making a living out there, and that's kind of, for where they are, that's tough.
Well, if you look at, like, in the last, say, 4 or 5 years, the best to come out of New York would be Shushu, Bruce Carrington. He signed with Top Rank. He's moved to Vegas. He can make a living. But the rest of them are out here in New York, and they're hustling. They're selling tickets. They're trying to get on local cards just to make $1,000, $1,500. What are you going to do with that if you're fighting every 3 months?
Well, that and the fact is, you know, the local cards are becoming shorter and shorter and shorter. There's no TV, you know, so it's very hard for these promoters to find a place. You got to sell tickets. The pay is not that great. And if you have promoters and managers, you're piecing up your money. Right. You're not taking all your money.
And if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense.
Exactly right. I want to ask you a question as far as your experience going back to the amateur end. You know, national tournaments, a lot now. more so, probably more kids competing than maybe 10, 15 years ago. What's your take on these young fighters fighting so many amateur fights today? You feel good, bad, indifferent? If you were bringing a fighter, are you fighting them as much? Is 90 amateur fights, 100 amateur fights too much?
No.
Why?
The more fights, the better you're going to be. Learn to move your head better. Learn to block punches better. I'd rather that than a novice going in and taking a haymaker across the jaw.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like you get more experience, you'll last longer in the ring.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing it now. In our area, a lot of young kids, they're out there 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, competing, some of them 20, 30 amateur fights by the time they're 13, 14 years old. I have my opinion on it. I think what you say makes sense. Mine is I like quality over quantity. And sometimes I think the quantity doesn't necessarily make you a better fighter all the time. You know, but that's another discussion for us as coaches to have. Where do you see the Metros going in the next couple of years? What are your goals and aspirations for the USA Metros and to keep boxing moving in a positive force in the state of New York?
Yeah, I mean, my goal is just basically to create more tournaments and more shows and opportunities for these kids, and, you know, educate them on financial freedom when they get older, and, you know, what they need to do to survive, not just as a boxer, but to be a law-abiding citizen in this country. Like, what are you going to do after boxing's done? What are you going to do after school is done? You know, so my goal for them is just not educating them just in boxing, but educating them spirit, mind, and body.
Yeah, I mean, being a teacher, you bring a lot more to the table. And, you know, I was talking with Bruce earlier, boxing, there's so many different people in boxing. You know, not everybody's going to be an aspiring amateur or a pro, but it does change people's lives. It does give, you know, like you wanted to defend yourself, and look where you took it as an athlete. Everybody's got a story why they want to box or why they end up in a boxing gym. What do you think? Give me, as a teacher, and you've been in the Metros, give me an inside story of something that really impacted you as a coach, as a teacher in this game.
I mean, I've had so many success stories of kids that were just couldn't get it together at the age of 13, and now they're 21, and they're, you know, even some of them aren't even boxing anymore, but I've been able to help them through our Give a Kid a Dream program or our New York City Cops and Kids program, where I've helped them take the sanitation test to be a sanitation worker, or I've helped them get their GED. You know, I've helped kids get a GED, and now they're working full time, and they came to Cops and Kids to be a boxer. You know, I was like, you're 19 years old, you never boxed, you're not going to be a boxer. You're going to come in here, we're going to sit down, we're going to study, we're going to get your GED, and you're going to get a job. You can box on the side, and that's really been my success stories with kids here.
Hit on that, because we're going to go out to Cops and Kids and talk to Pat Russo and the guys out there and everybody that's involved. Talk about that program real quick.
Sure. So we have 3 free programs, 2 in Staten Island, 1 in Brooklyn. And it's for kids ages 12 to 21. It's funded through donations, shows, NYPD Boxing, and we have a tutoring program, we have a mentoring program, we have a little office, I have computers there, I buy SAT prep books, you know, whatever the kids need, and they train, they get free training, and we sign them up for the shows. It's the same one thing I do here at Gleason's too. We have Give a Kid a Dream, where we have every Wednesday the kids come in, they train, we talk to them about, you know, school if they need help. We kind of help them with issues with their parents. Their parents will come in and be like, listen, my kid's not listening, and I'll be like, give me a day. You know, I spend the day with the kid here at Gleason's. The next time I see the parent, she's like, wow, thank you. You know, so that's kind of what the goal is for Metro and for us. If you're not helping the future, what are you really doing?
Yeah, you know, the sport right now is, we need all the momentum, you know, at a younger level. Baseball, basketball, football, you know, been entrenched for years.
Right.
But, you know, boxing is now not only an inner city sport. Years ago, inner city gyms are popping up all over the place. You're starting to see more and more.
Well, it's trendy. It's trendy. You see these glove works, rumble, you know, these shadow box. These are like cardio gyms. That's not boxing.
I don't count those.
I don't count them either. That's not blood, sweat, and tears for me.
I'm talking about gyms where you come in and you have to go through a training program, learn from a trainer from the beginning, from the roots, the ground up. And, and eventually if you're going to spar or get in the ring, there has to be some preparation, a process and procedure with that across the board. One other thing on cops and kids, are these kids required to maintain grade point average?
So I'm not going to throw them out, but I ask them for their report cards to make sure that they're doing okay. So if they're not, I can help them. I speak to the parents to make sure that they're being respectful in school, because I'm not going to teach you how to fight if you're going to be disrespectful at home.
Yeah.
So it's not a requirement. I mean, we'd like it, but it doesn't always work that way, and you can't kick the kid out. Not everybody's a school.
No, look, that's why we got, we manage personalities, right? So you got to manage the personality of who they are and what they are. Some kids are not book smart, so you find another way.
Right.
But if they're coming in, they're being productive, they're being positive in a way, and I think that, for me, that's a big plus right there. We're not going to kick kids out of the gym.
No, and I like to see the change in the kids. Sometimes the kids will come in here and they'll talk to me looking at the floor. But then over the next course of the next 3-4 weeks, they're coming in and they're maintaining eye contact with me, and their whole personality shifts, and I can just see them fill, kind of with self-confidence.
Well, you're in the educational system, so you see a lot of different aspects of kids. As far as, coming into the boxing gym, you've been around the gym prior to the social media or just on the,
right.
So you see the old-time people coming into the gym that have a different, to a lot of these young kids right now. And I think we get to talk to them, not in a malicious way, in the boxing gym a little different than maybe some of the educators in the school, because we're going to hold them accountable and say, look, you can't be here. And your mommy or daddy's not going to email me and send a note to say, no, if you're not following it. I mean, and I know you're no nonsense.
Zero.
You're right there. So look, I've had the opportunity to be at shows that Sonya runs. And look, I got great respect for you, and you know what? You zing the shit out of me all the time. All the time, you know what I mean? And look, I'm not originally from Connecticut, but now that I know you're from Massachusetts now.
Where are you from originally?
I'm originally from New York. I grew up in Mount Vernon.
Wow.
What'd you think? I grew up there, and now you hid that Mass thing for how many years?
No, I've always been public about that, the 413.
But you know what? We're going to kind of finish up here,
Sure.
and I bang out a couple of questions.
Sure.
All right? So we're going to give you first question, bullet question here. And Bruce hit it right off the rip, and most people did. And as a school teacher, okay, I've had somebody ask me, I say, what, if you were in a foxhole, who are you going to pick to choose to be in a foxhole next to you? Now, I've had people say, what's a foxhole? Yes.
So who would I pick as far as a boxing person?
No, whoever. Pick somebody. Who's next to you? You're in a foxhole fighting. Who's next to you?
I mean, I would pick my girl because I know she would fight for me.
There you go.
That's it.
All right. 3 dinner guests. You get to have 3 dinner guests, dead or alive. Who do you want to have dinner with and speak to?
Wow, this is a tough one. Can they be old, from
anybody. You can pick anybody.
So I'd love Thomas Jefferson, Arturo Gatti. Probably be separate dinners, but that's okay. Maybe one of the ancient Greek philosophers.
All right. Going back to your roots.
Going back to my roots.
Going back to your roots there. Well, listen, I appreciate you. This is really an honor for me to come down here for both you and Bruce, and to catch up with you, and you're doing great things. Please tell everybody where they could find you on social media. Sure. And, where they could pick you up.
Sure. So usaboxingmetro.com is our website, and my personal is @slamonakis boxing.
Okay, well, we appreciate you having you on Coach's Corner. Train hard, train smart, and we'll see you on the next round of Coach's Corner. I'm Coach Dave. Welcome back to Coach's Corner.
Come on.